start working on what is going to be, I guess, our last project for the year. Originally we were going to make the accordion books, but then I realized that that's made almost entirely out of using X-Acto knives, so probably not a great remote assignment. And then as far as the stop motion at the end, you may or may not have a Chromebook that has the stop motion app. They used to be on all of them, but apparently they were taken off the ones that weren't in my room. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but we're still going to make our movie set. So think back to the painting that you and your group chose. I have all that information down if you want to use that same painting, or you can use any famous painting that you want. There's a lot going around through this pandemic of people recreating famous artworks at home, like reenacting them. So I mean, there's tons of like paintings that are out there. So you can choose whatever painting you want. I'm going to do my example from one of my favorite paintings in the world, and we're going to create it from being a two-dimensional representation to a three-dimensional movie set. All year long we've worked on making a 2D drawing look like it's three-dimensional. Now we're going to switch it up. We're going to take something 2D and make it actually 3D.
Okay, so the painting I'm going to do is called Tents at Lake O'Hara by John Singer Sargent. It's great for a scene, and it also has some really lovely colors, and it's one of my favorite paintings. It's not on display right now. It lives at the Wadsworth Athenaeum. The last time I went up there, it wasn't on display, and I was really sad. It's a small painting, but there's just something really mesmerizing about it, and John Singer Sargent is pretty much the master of light. So the first thing I'm going to do in looking at this image is I'm going to separate it out into foreground, middle ground, and background. Now we've been doing this for months now in trying to figure out what is the furthest away, what's in the middle ground and the middle distance, and what's up close to us. If you have any people in the painting, you don't necessarily have to worry about them right now unless they're in the very, very background. If I was going to turn this into an actual scene, so basically he painted this when he was on sort of a vacation, and where he painted this, you can see that there's going to be the ground. We're going to treat the ground as its own surface. We're going to treat the background of its own as its own surface, and then the tents in the middle I'm going to make as scenery. Today we're going to be concerned with figuring out what is exactly in the background and just doing a backdrop of that. We're going to learn a little bit about Stagecraft 101, which is really just like in the theater how they would make a sort of three-dimensional looking world. So the backdrop is usually going to be on fabric. We're not going to do it on fabric, and if you don't have paints, that's okay too. You can use any kind of coloring supply. But we want to do 3 thumbnail sketches. So this is step 1, to make 3 thumbnail sketches. If we were going to separate this painting out into 3 layers, what is in the background, what is in the middle ground, what is in the foreground. And these are going to be fast little sketches. It's a rectangular composition, so I'm doing the same thing. My backdrop is pretty much just the trees. And you can make these little quick thumbnail sketches, maybe with colored pencil might be a good thing to do if you have them. In the middle ground are those tents. These are going to be really rough sketches to just figure out what it is we're looking at. The fire is also in the middle ground. And I'm making the line value a bit thicker just so I can tell. And then in the foreground is the guy. Think back to 5th grade gesture drawings if you have any people in yours. So these are really, really rough. Okay, so I'm going to use some colored pencils to just kind of get an idea. Of what we're working with. So these should be really fast little sketches, just to get a sense of what is in each space. Don't forget to use opposite colors for shadows. Doing little color thumbnails too gives you a little bit of a preview of what's going to happen when you start painting or make it on a bigger scale. Okay, next we're going to make our backdrop. We've got a thumbnail sketch for it. If you have a piece of cardboard, you can do this. You could, if you just had a piece of white paper, like nice thick white paper, or any kind of white paper, you know, a big size would be good. But if you just have cardboard, if you do have paint, you can do that. It depends on what coloring supply that you're going to use. Technically, if you had fabric, white fabric, and fabric markers, you could actually make a backdrop like in, you know, they would do in the theater. But I have some acrylic paint, and in the classroom this would be our little intro to using acrylics. But we're not going to focus too much on that as a material because it might not be something you have access to. If you have pens, you can use them, colored pencils, like you could use crayons, watercolors, whatever you have. So if you were using something like watercolors or colored pencils, you'd want to put a white piece of paper over your cardboard. What we're going to do is we're going to make a score line on the cardboard. And a score line is just a little half cut. I did that with scissors. And then you have something that will hopefully stand up for you. So this is what I'm going to do my background on. As you can see, I just have my primaries here. But if you do have acrylic paint, that's all you're really going to need. And on this backdrop, I'm going to paint just what I see in the background of my image. If there are people in the background of your image that wouldn't necessarily be part of a story, imagine that you would be turning this into a stop motion, then you can still paint them in the background, or you can remove all the people entirely if they're going to be a part of your story. If you're using paints, always put the darker color into the lighter color. That way, if I was putting the yellow into the blue to make green, it would take up so much of the yellow, whereas the blue is much more saturated. If you are using acrylic paints and painting on cardboard, you might do better to paint over the whole thing white before you do this, or you could do this on paper and then attach it to it. I like to have a different brush for my tints that I do for my shades, but right now I just have this one, so in between I really have to wash it really thoroughly. It's usually better to do sky or anything that is really, even separating this out to foreground, middle ground, background, to do those first, so then you're painting over it in layers. Remember, when you're painting, things have a shadow side and a tint side. To make my shadow side, I'm going to make a pretty good pile of green there, and I'm going to add the opposite color. Now that looks a little bit purple, so I'm going to add a little bit more yellow. Well, I'm getting there. I'm getting some of that brown. I can't see the bottoms of these trees in the painting, so I'm just going to assume what's happening with them. So you might need to make up some of your image. And you get brown by mixing all three of your primaries. And also ask yourself, where is my light source? And know that the shadows will be on the opposite side. Right, so my camera battery died, and so the end of my painting didn't get recorded, but here's the finished result. And here are some other examples of student work over the years that were their finished sets. We get the famous painting, there's Van Gogh, and then the set, the Jacques-Louis David's, both of the Harishi brothers, and then there's the set. So notice how these have been broken into the backdrop, which is what we're focusing on today. Rousseau painting, and that's that painting in the background is what I'd like you to work on today. And later on, then we'll start doing the scenery and the characters.